Welcome back to our How-To vlog series on Freedom from Suffering Now. I'm Dr. Steve Grinstead, and on this vlog I want to talk about how to identify and manage the inner saboteur for effective chronic pain management. You know, I've been living with my chronic pain for a long time, and I've been working with others in chronic pain a little bit less than that since 1984. And I can tell you there were many times when I sabotaged myself with ineffective interventions, ineffective self-care, a lot of different things. So today we're going to talk all about that inner saboteur. So I want to ask you a question. When you see this question, what is the inner saboteur? What comes up for you? Just take a minute to think about that. What images come up for you? You know, has there ever been a time in your life when you had something very exciting that you wanted to do, you wanted to accomplish, you wanted to gain, and it didn't happen? But the major reason it didn't happen because you got in your own way? Hey, I know that's happened for me many times. That's kind of what we're talking about. You know, sometimes we have all this internal conflict, the voices in the head. You know, we get, do I, don't I, can I, won't I? And we have all these different voices, quote, of reason, unquote, telling us what to do. The question then is, which voice do I listen to? Does this one make sense to you? I know for me, I tend to listen sometimes to the wrong voice. But there's many different ways of looking at this, so I'm going to introduce a few others. Years ago, when I was training in the martial arts, we were getting ready to go into this big tournament, and we were literally bouncing off the walls. And Sensei Kim walked in. He says, the jungle is restless. Let me tell you about the monkey mind. And this is a Zen concept. It goes back a long time, and it talks about that part of us that's always swinging from worry to doubt to fear. You know, it's the hypervigilant part that's always scanning the environment for perceived danger. And unfortunately, the monkey isn't very smart. Fortunately, though, there's times when this part of us helps us survive. In more modern terms, it's the fight, flight, freeze. The amygdala, limbic, and the brainstem, the more primitive part of the brain, it's our self-defense mechanism that allowed us to become the dominant species on planet Earth. Different cultures have different ways of looking at this sabotage. In the native culture, it talks about inside of us there are two wolves. There's a good wolf and there's an evil wolf. Now, we all have both parts, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? A famous psychiatrist, Carl Jung, used to call it the shadow side, and he encouraged us to embrace the shadow, not fight it. What I particularly like about this story, though, is when the grandfather is telling his grandsons about the battle of the two wolves inside us all, the grandson asks the grandfather, well, which one wins? And the answer is very obvious. It's the one that gets fed the most. So we manifest what comes as a result of our beliefs and perceptions and our thinking. And a lot of times this inner saboteur heads us over to the wrong side and we start feeding the wrong wolf. So however you look at it, the committee in the head, the evil wolf, the monkey mind, what it really is, it's a set of automatic and unconscious mistaken thoughts, beliefs, opinions, and conclusions that we hold to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we go out looking for evidence that supports it, and unfortunately we block out any evidence that counters it. Now look at this for a minute. If we say so focused and so fixated on one way of being, say suffering with chronic pain, it's always going to be like this. My pain is killing me. I don't know how to handle this. I'm never going to be able to help. Nobody can help me. All those type of self-defeating thoughts come in. Now, the human mind has the potential for thousands of thoughts to go through it each day, but we can only focus on a finite number. Unfortunately, when we focus on the negative side, we miss out on all the other possibilities. And man, it's a myriad of them. There's a lot of different things that we could be doing instead. We can challenge the monkey, and we can stop feeding the monkey bananas. The bananas are the self-defeating thinking patterns that we can get into and indulge, especially when suffering with chronic pain. A lot of times we need some breathing space. The premise here is our beliefs and perceptions lead to our thoughts. And when we focus on the monkey thoughts, it generates usually an uncomfortable feeling. Anger, fear, guilt, shame, those are some of the 4 primary fuel sources. And that leads to an urge to do something about it. And a lot of people go on unconscious. They hit the trigger, they don't take the breathing space, they get into self-defeating behaviors or actions, and they wonder, why is everybody upset? Because for every action, there's a social reaction. What we need to do is learn that we need to make better decisions, and there's a decision point between the urge and the action. So actions or behaviors are a combination of urges plus decisions. So let's make better decisions. Take a time out. A lot of times people make poor decisions when they're in the middle of a bad pain flare-up, for example. So we want to help you identify which of the challenging patterns of self-defeating thinking are kicking in that you need some breathing space in order to change. So I've been calling it the inner saboteur, but now let's shift and talk about what it really is. To do this, let me ask you, you're aware that the body has an immune system, right? That protects us from germs and viruses. Well, our mind has an immune system too, and part of the immune system of the mind is this psychological defense mechanism called denial. Now, unfortunately, denial gets a bad rap because there's both pros and cons for denial. And it can be a good thing until it stops being a good thing and it starts causing more problems than it's helping with. So what I want to do is I want to come up with a common definition of what I think denial is. So basically, it's an automatic and unconscious way of acting in the world that has a good reason to protect us against painful reality. But unfortunately, if we keep going there, it can lead to our problem, getting worse and taking us down. And most importantly, it's a normal part of being a human being on classroom earth. We all have it. Have you ever been told you're in denial? I know I have. And what a no-win position, because if I am, I don't know it, and if I'm not going to prove it to you. So I want to depathologize and normalize denial and talk about it, because the first step of solving any problem is recognizing the problem. So I want to go through and talk about, that these patterns that kick up, there's 12 common patterns. And the essence of these is their primary negative, irrational, self-defeating thoughts that lead us to say, hey, I don't have a problem because I don't want to face that painful reality. And eventually it gets to the point where it makes my problem get even worse. So that's the sabotage patterns. We're going to take them one at a time and talk about the common definition, underlying mistaken belief, and developing an artistic interpretation of each of the patterns. As I'm going to start with the big 5, these are the patterns that are common to most human beings. And as I'm going through these, be kind of rating yourself. How often do I do this? A little bit? A lot of the time? Some of the time? Most of the time? All of the time? Now, all of these patterns we all have, so I just want you to take a look as we go through each one and see if you can pick out which ones apply most to you. So let's start with avoidance. So again, one of the definitions might be something like, if I just don't think about it or talk about it or do anything that's going to make me focus on my problem, that's what this is. And the underlying mistaken belief is, because if I do that, they'll go away. Magical thinking, right? But do they really go away? No. Now with avoidance, there's four. See which one you identify with most. There's avoidance by saying nothing. The mistaken belief is it'll go away if I just don't talk about it. And the next one, distraction. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody about something very important to you and all of a sudden you got on a different topic? Well, somebody started focusing on something else, either automatically, unconsciously, or on purpose. Then there's the uproar, creating some trauma and drama. And if I get enough pressure, it's going to take the spotlight off me and put it on the crisis. And of course, nobody would ever do this one, right? Playing dumb or pretending not to know. Oh, I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to take more than 4 pills a day. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to mix alcohol with my pain pills. I mean, those are some I've heard, by the way. And I didn't know that I was supposed to go to physical therapy 3 times a week. I mean, there's different sabotage patterns here that kick in. Now, when I thought about this, I wanted to have an artistic interpretation. My partner in life and business, Ellen, came up with the next graphic of avoidance. My question to you is, how do you avoid your painful reality? This one kind of said it all to me. Next pattern is absolute denial. We repress, we push it down out of our awareness. And because if I refuse to admit a problem exists, in spite of overwhelming and convincing evidence that it does, then the mistaken belief is, I don't have a problem, then the problem is solved. If you believe and I believe I don't have a problem, that means I don't have to change. I don't have to do anything different. Have you ever blocked out or repressed your painful reality? In all your travels, have you ever been to this state, the state of denial? Have some humor with this. If we can't laugh at ourselves, if we take ourselves too seriously, this isn't going to work. So part of identifying and managing the inner saboteur is learning to have a sense of humor about it. The next pattern is the most common of all 12. It's minimizing. It's seeing a problem as less serious than it really is. And because I convince myself and others the problem isn't that bad, again, I don't have to change and it'll go away. Magically, it'll just go away. Now, let's take a look. Let's switch for a minute. We have a slide here, and there's 10 stops on the slide. Now, if our problem, our self-defeating pattern, our problem, was only a level 1 problem, it would take about 10 pounds of energy or effort in order to stop that ball from rolling down and destroying us. But because it's not that bad, we don't do anything. Do you think the ball stays in place? Oh no, it gains momentum, and by the time it gets down to the middle, it's going to take 10 times more effort in order to stop it before it takes us out. But because it's still not that bad, so our brain tells us, it keeps going, and when it gets down near the bottom, it may be impossible to stop. It's gained so much momentum. Starts with a little snowball and turns into a big avalanche. And then even if my problem isn't that bad, the question I need to ask myself is, how bad do I have to let it get before I get into authentic action? So how bad does it have to get before you stop it? That's my question. How much do you identify to this minimizing? Now sometimes, remember, all of these patterns, sometimes they're a blessing and sometimes they're a curse. Rationalizing. Out of all 12, this is my main go-to. and it's also the one that supports all the other 11. So a common definition might be something like justifying your problem behavior by making sure you have a damn good reason for doing it. And the underlying mistaken belief is if I have a good reason for my problem behavior, I shouldn't have any negative consequences. Nobody should be mad at me. Years ago, I was at a workshop with Dr. Stephen Covey, and when he said this, it blew me away. Because I tend to do this a lot, try to think my way out of a problem I behave my way into. And this is a big one. So this requires a change in action as well as a change in thinking. And it also reminds me of a quote by Albert Einstein years ago. You cannot solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created that problem. So that is rationalizing. Now the last of the big five is blaming. And this one hurts us more than it hurts anybody else. It's when I refuse to accept responsibility for solving my problem because it's somebody else's fault. The underlying mistaken belief is if somebody else is responsible, that means I don't have to change. I don't have to do anything. But the reality is, I'm putting myself in a bad place when I do that. But think for a minute. Have you ever blamed others in order to avoid taking action to help yourself? And the big thing about this one, blaming puts and keeps you in the victim role. So when we're busy pointing fingers, make sure to realize that there's enough blame to go around and we're really hurting ourselves. I know I learned in Al-Anon years ago that holding on and blaming others and having a resentment is like taking poison and hoping the other person dies. It's not a very fun image, is it? So now that we've gone through the five, this is the support team, the small seven. First one is comparing. Again, believing it's not a problem because other people are worse than me. And if somebody's worse than me, that proves I really don't have a problem. But guess what? We also compare ourselves good or bad. And it's literally like comparing apples to oranges. It's just that we have different preferences. Sometimes I want an orange, sometimes I want an apple. Doesn't make one better than the other. And a thing I learned a long time ago is we don't want to compare our insides by other people's outsides. In other words, what's going on in my head is unique to me, and even though people are putting on a good show, they might have some very similar things going on in their heads. And I too can put on a very good facade. The second one is manipulating. And I've seen this so many times in pain management, and it happens so subtly sometimes. Wanting people to fix me. And if I can get somebody else to do it for me, then that means I don't have to exert myself. I don't have to risk a pain flare-up. I don't have to change. Manipulation isn't good to be on either end of these puppet strings. So, be honest with yourself. Have you ever tried to manipulate other people in order to get something, to get your needs met? It's kind of human nature. We learn that as really little kids. All of these patterns start in childhood, by the way. And at some point, they may have helped us survive some pretty painful realities. And unfortunately, though, as I mentioned earlier, if we hold on to them, eventually they will take us out. The fear pattern. Now, there's two faces of this one. One is fear of change, and the other is change by fear. Sometimes people get into scared straight. I scare myself in order to force myself to change. Or, if I change, bad things are going to happen. For example, one of the mistaken beliefs that stops a lot of my patients who end up having a medication management problem up to and including addiction, they will say something like, without my pain meds, my life's over, so I can't stop. And then on the other side of it though, oh my God, I almost overdosed. I'm never going to do it again. And the mistaken belief is fear alone will prevent me from future trouble. So fear of change or change by fear. Either face is not, you know, so do you depend on fear to keep you out of trouble, or are you afraid to make a change? The three acronyms down at the bottom here, two of them are the problem, the one on the left. The one on the right's the solution. The first one is false evidence appearing real. Some people say false expectations appearing real. And a lot of our fears are groundless. A lot of times, for a lot of us, when we hit fear, we go to the other one. The politically correct version of the other one is forget everything and run. And then how about the solution? Well, the solution can be face everything and revitalize, face everything and recover. So, you know, fear alone is not the antidote for painful reality. Fear can be a good initial motivator, but eventually it goes away. We have built-in forgetters. We remember the good things and we forget the bad. We remember pleasure, we forget pain. Compliance. There's two big faces of this one, you know, pretending to solve a problem to be left alone. The mistaken belief is if I can get people to leave me alone by going through the motions, the problem will go away. And some people are on the people-pleasing side of compliance. I've got to pretend to solve this so people will like me, they'll be nice to me, they'll do something for me, or I won't hurt their feelings, something like that. Then on the other side, we combine a little bit of that manipulation I went through a minute ago. We try to con and manipulate somebody by pretending in order to con them, to get them off our back so we can do whatever we damn well please. Be honest. Have you ever said yes when you really meant no, just to avoid conflict? I know I have. Now, sometimes it's a good thing to say yes when you really would like to say no. The example I use a lot is if I get pulled over for a traffic stop and will you please give me your driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration, I better say yes. I don't have to, but if I don't, I'm going to be in big trouble. Flight into health or suddenly cured. So this is where I'm believing that I'm all better now, so I can quit working so hard. I can stop doing what got me here. I convince myself I don't need to do anything else. I don't have to continue to grow. I don't need to keep working hard. And the mistaken belief is feeling better means I'm cured. And that can be a very, very dangerous thing. I tell people the recovery healing process is like walking up a down escalator and having a mistaken belief that if I stop, I'll stay right where I'm at. I don't. The escalator goes down. So here's an image that I'm going to show you in a minute. There's three people in the image. There's a doctor, a spouse, and a patient. The patient has just had a procedure, and the doctor is explaining to the wife, he's cured. And some people don't like this one, and they don't get it at first. But for me, when I first saw it, I just cracked up. I've got a weird sense of humor. I see this cured ham in the middle of the bed. But what it really meant was, you know, a cured ham went from being a living, loving spouse to a dead ham. And sometimes when we get into suddenly cured, we can die. We can really be cured. Hopelessness. This one, the believing I can't be helped. And there's two faces of this one. One is acting hopeless, the other is being hopeless, and using that hopelessness to push people away. And because it's hopeless, I just will convince other people not to even try. And if I pretend to be hopeless, other people are going to leave me alone. So let me ask you, have there ever been times when you tried to convince yourself your situation was hopeless and it really was? I've been there. You know, very painful. When in my early pain rehabilitation, I got to the point where I honestly mistakenly believed my life was over. Why even bother? Why live another day? And I was seriously considering suicide as an option. And that was a very painful place to be. Have you ever been to this street corner? The corner of discouraged and hopeless? Because, I've been there, down in a deep, dark pit where I felt I was all alone, all by myself, and I had no way out. But there was a way out, and there were people that came into my life and helped teach me how to get out of that place and move into a new direction. And while there is breath, there is always hope. So, the hopeless denial pattern can really sabotage a good pain management program. And we're not hopeless. We need to move beyond hopeless and helpless to a sense of empowerment. The last of the denial patterns I call the democratic disease state, or the right to be this way. I get into this part. The definition is believing I have a right to live my life the way I want despite any problems. And because I have that right, you should leave me alone. Righteous indignation sometimes. You know, it's a very it's my way or the highway. A lot of different ways of looking at this. So have you ever used self-destructive behaviors in a self-righteous way? Now, for the artistic interpretation of this one, I asked my partner Ellen to come up with a graphic that reminds her of me when I'm in this denial pattern. And here's what she found. Yeah, I hate admitting it, but sometimes that's absolutely it. And when I'm on the other side, I have a shame reaction. Oh God, did I really do that again? And so we all do this. We're human. That's a big part of this. We're human. So that's pretty much it. You're learning as much as you can about your defense mechanisms and how they can help you and how they can hurt you is really important. If you haven't had a chance to go to our website, freedomfromsufferingnow.com, I'd encourage you to take a look at it. And there's a lot of different resources. On the articles page, there's a lot of good articles on there. If you want a more spiritual approach, you can go to my facebook.com/spiritualwarriorwithoutarmor. There's a lot of different places to go, and one of the ones I would suggest if you're living with chronic pain is go visit chronicpainanonymous.org and check out their publications and maybe get some of them. So I want to thank you very much for being here on this how-to vlog on how to identify the inner saboteur. And the first step towards management is knowing that it's there. So you have taken a big step, and I would encourage you to take it to the next level. Onward and upward, and thank you so much for joining me, and stay tuned for future vlogs on how to.